the first study you did was leaky buckets, and then the follow-up. Can you give us an overview?
Yeah, so, when I started in my job 3.5 years ago, at the Institute for Canadian Citizenship, I said, all right, immigration, what's going on? And I tried to read as much as I could. And what I found was, of course, just like today, a lot of debate about how many people ought to be coming into the country. And it's a reasonable discussion. But I said, all right, well, what's our retention rate? What's the churn here? How many are staying? And I was actually quite surprised that nobody knew. Like the government didn't know, StatsCan didn't know, because nobody bothered to check.
Seems like something you should be checking.
Well, we have this, I think, outdated view of immigration that everyone's coming from these destitute backgrounds. And we do still welcome people who are fleeing war and violence and persecution. We welcome people with lower skill backgrounds who are, really leaving in search of a better life, and for whom even hardship in Canada is worth it because of the opportunity in the future. But more and more now, we're actually being very, very selective about who's coming.
Who's coming?
People with master's degrees who speak English and French. We reject 95 to 96% of people in the point system. So you have to be in the top 4%. That's like Harvard University level of admissions. I think they're at 3.6 at Harvard, so maybe just a little bit more competitive, but pretty close. So we're taking a totally different type of person. And so they are a globally coveted talent pool. Who also have global options, not just in their country of origin, but in other countries. We talk about nurses, construction supervisors, etc. These are positions that are in demand everywhere. And so we are competing with this pool, and instead of just thinking of immigration as a reflection of our compassion, we ought to recognize that immigration is a reflection of our ambition, that we need immigrants in many cases much more than they need us, and that we ought to work hard to make sure that they think that their decision to move here was the right decision.
Because I think a lot of people have this idea that people are coming here from war-torn countries, and we have this sentiment that if you don't like it here, just go back to where you came from. But these people are actually, like you said, some of the people that, I guess other people would see, these people are going to add to the economy. They're not going to be taking away from the economy.
Yeah, and even refugees to Canada.
Not to say that refugees take away from
it's important to just address.
So what has changed within that time period, within the last 30 years, that people are actually becoming less favorable towards immigration?
Well, I think students are actually a big part of the shift, and international student numbers have grown really, really rapidly, like tripled in the space of 4 or 5 years, and the plight of international students has, I think deservedly, caught a lot of public attention. International students in Canada are not doing well. The report that we just released last year called The Leaky Bucket, looking at immigrant retention in Canada, actually found that people who arrived here as international students and then became permanent residents are the most likely to leave, suggesting that their education that they received is maybe not as beneficial as it ought to be when it comes to integration into the Canadian workforce. So I think a lot of people are looking at huge spikes of population, especially around universities and colleges, and they are also seeing international students living in tents and really struggling. I mean, the High Commissioner of India was saying that they are sending body bags home every week from people who are committing suicide because they cannot bear to tell their family that this immense investment that they've made to send them to Canada is not panning out. We're seeing crimes of desperation really rising amongst international students. We're talking about drug dealing, prostitution, things like this, because they're unable to make ends meet here. And I think this really actually shows that Canada has really, in my opinion, abused international students. We've brought them here to pay $100,000 for an education in like general business marketing. I was talking to some people who were getting diplomas to be stockbrokers. It's a career that in many cases just does not exist anymore, and there's no need for them for those skills. And so instead of bringing in people to be nurses and carpenters and things that Canada needs, but also then acquiring skills that can allow them to really succeed in Canada and contribute and make a go of it here and have a positive life. We're seeing a large group of international students that are becoming sort of an underclass. And so this doesn't benefit Canada. It doesn't benefit the immigration consensus. A lot of people are thinking, well, they don't belong here. But it also doesn't benefit the students. And I think this is really important to know. they're getting diplomas in large part, in like basket weaving, basically. And this doesn't help anybody. So it just shows that Canada needs to be smart about it. And people like me, I'm often asked, all right, well, if the anti-immigration sentiment is not realistic, you think there should be, more immigrants, double, triple, quadruple? I mean, I'm not here to advocate for a specific target. I'm here to say that we should be smart about how we use people at different stages of their lives and at different stages of their careers to contribute to Canada's success. I mean, maybe it's the pandemic, that's kind of locked us down here, but I think we've missed what's happened in the rest of the world over the last 30 years. The rest of the world has developed incredibly quickly relative to Canada, relative to a lot of the rich countries, I should say. It's not just a Canadian thing. And they've surpassed us in many respects. We've not really seen this, and so we continue to think of immigrants as coming with the proverbial $5 in their pocket. No education, working hard. The Statue of Liberty, cold huddled masses kind of thing, and that's just antiquated. It's just out of date. I mean, there are still people coming like that, but it's a smaller and smaller share. So while the average immigrant has changed, our perception has not evolved accordingly. And so we're going to continue to miss the mark here unless we recognize that in many of these cases, Canada needs immigrants more than the immigrants need us. If we're not wise to that, then we're going to continue to lose out on the talents of these people who really have an opportunity to be difference makers for our country. If and only if we can convince them that this is the place where they belong. This is my place, these are my people, and it is to Canada's success that I wish to devote myself long term.
I know there's somebody watching this thinking, well, if you come here, you don't like how it is, and you have that option to leave, just go back to literally where you came from.
Yeah, and they are, right? And they are. And so they're free to do that. And they're doing like what you and I would do. And hey, like I lived in England for a period. I left and came back to Canada. There are people who are going to not be happy with their decision to move someplace, or going to want to move back for family reasons or other things. But again, immigration is not just about us being nice to people. It is about that, but it's about a lot more than that. We talk about temporary foreign workers, for example. It's a bit of a different subject, but I think it illustrates the principle. We have a huge wave of retirements that are happening in the construction industry in Ontario and across Canada. And I've spoken to some of these, big construction companies, and they say, especially in the middle tier of management, we're missing huge amounts of people. Now, these are jobs that pay like $100,000 or $200,000 a year, okay? And they've been held by the same person for 25 years. We've not trained the next generation, and so site supervisors and these kinds of things, there's a major shortage of them. It's one of the reasons why the Eglinton Crosstown and some of our other construction projects move so slowly. We don't have experienced supervisors at that middle upper level. And so construction companies are bringing them in from everywhere around the world, from Ireland, from other places that speak English where they do have this type of experience. Temporary workers making a ton of money. You don't hear that much about that, right? Who benefits more from them being here? Them or us? They could work anywhere. They could make even more money working in Abu Dhabi doing the exact same job. They could, they are globally in demand. Now, we're a little easier. We speak English. They already speak English. That's an advantage. We have many other benefits recommending the country. It's a beautiful and abundant country. It's going to be a temperate country, fare well in climate change relative to other parts of the world. There are a lot of good things about Canada. But we need to work hard to make sure that supervisor says, you know what, this is good. I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to build the next building and the next train and the next thing here because I want to be Canadian. I like what's going on here. And all of us complaining about infrastructure need to recognize that if that person leaves, we all lose. So there's a sense that immigrants, I don't think people think about it this way when they actually think about it, but they talk about it kind of blindly this way. Can you talk blindly? I don't know. They speak about it unthinkingly this way, that immigrants are just passive consumers of stuff. They just consume healthcare. They just consume housing. They consume space on the road. People are blaming immigration for traffic. But immigrants are not just takers, they're makers. They are producing healthcare. They are producing housing. They are working on a lot of these things. Economic immigrants are hand-selected for their ability to address precisely these needs. And if they leave, the needs that they are brought to address do not leave with them. And so we should not just do this thinking about immigrants in their own consideration. You don't like it, leave. Okay, that's one thing. That's true, and they are. But what do we lose when they leave? Let's think about ourselves for a moment. This is not to the net benefit of Canada, and that's part of the broader conversation that I hope we can adopt around immigration.